In this episode, we talk about grenade attacks on police stations in Punjab. We also talk about government opposing petitions seeking a lifetime ban on convicted politicians from contesting elections. But first, we talk about artificial intelligence and how important it is for India to develop its own large language model. Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. The emergence of artificial intelligence has changed the world that we live in. AI-powered tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and many more have made their way into our everyday lives and have given us a glimpse into the possibilities that AI was always believed to have. These tools are all examples of large language models or LLMs. These models have shown an exceptional proficiency to understand and interact with human languages in a meaningful way, something that is considered an extremely difficult task for computers. For the longest time, the creation of an LLM was seen as a hefty task that would cost a massive amount of money. But the recent release of DeepSeek, a Chinese LLM, has changed that perception. DeepSeek was created at a fraction of the cost of its American rivals, whose domination of the technology had remained unchallenged until its release. In this segment, my colleague Ichha Sharma talks to the Indian Express's Amitabh Sinha, who will help us understand the concept a little better and where India stands in the race for creating its own LLM and AI-powered tool.
Amitabh, could you start by telling us how does India currently position itself, in the global AI landscape, especially compared to countries, say, US and China?
We have a lot of research and activities going on in the field of AI. The current excitement relating to AI has mainly come out from, chat GPT kind of tools that emerged a couple of years ago. And after that, we have seen a string of such tools, so many of them. You have Google tool, you have Perplexity, Gemini, ChatGPT, you have all sorts of things, and many more actually, Grok and all sorts of things. Now, they are all belong to a certain category. They all are in the same category actually, what is known as large language models or LLMs as they are called, right? Now, these are not the only thing that represent AI. AI must not be equated with LLMs. So if you remember in the 90s, AI used to be represented by how well a machine could play chess. And in the mid 90s, for the first time, it was a machine called Deep Blue made by IBM, which defeated Garry Kasparov at that point of time. It was a big, majorly build-up match. It used to be called the man versus machine sort of a match. And I think it was 95 or 97, the first time that the machine actually beat Garry Kasparov. At that point of time, that was the power of AI. Artificial intelligence used to be measured in how well a machine was able to play chess. Now we have come a long way from there. Today, as anyone who has used any one of these tools can realize that these are far more advanced and are able to have a conversation, very human-like conversations that are able to get, and also very informative conversations that we are able to have with machine, which was not possible just a few years ago. So the excitement that we see is majorly because of these tools that have emerged. But there are lots of other things that are happening in artificial intelligence, which are happening in India as well. And there is quite a vibrant research ecosystem that exists in India. But right now, the benchmarking is whether you are able to do LLMs or not, whether a country or a corporation has been able to develop an LLM or not, because right now that is the cutting edge of artificial intelligence. And that is where we are yet to develop our own LLMs. We don't have that. Only the private industry in the United States has developed it. China came out with DeepSeek. There are a couple of similar LLMs that have come out of Europe, Mistral, and there are a couple of others as well. So we don't have anything that has come out of India as of now.
Right, and you just spoke about LLMs, and even in your article, you speak how they are a part of foundational models, apart from computer vision. So, could you tell us what are foundational models and also how do they pave the way for AI development?
What has happened in the last 1 decade, the computer has now been able to, it has been trained on so much of data that it's able to recognize patterns very well. It now understands very well how to distinguish a cat from a dog, even if both of them have a lot of fur. Similarly, because it has been trained on lots and lots of language data, it is able to now understand and communicate in a language that we understand. And also, if we communicate in these tools, with these tools, ChatGPT kind of tools, we realize we do not necessarily have to write grammatically correct English for it to give us an answer. It understands our spoken English. It understands, your and my version of language with equal proficiency and is able to give us a sort of a reasonably good answer. Now, foundational model is anything that is able to do multiple tasks rather than just one thing, right? Now, this particular tool, ChatGPT or any other tool, is not just giving me text answers. It is doing a whole lot of other things also. So if you put in a file and say, make a précis of this or condense it into just 500 words, it is able to do that. It is able to suggest things. It's probably, it also sometimes is able to do a bit of calculation. It gives you sometimes a graph. It is able to generate, some pictures and graphs and all sorts of things. So it is a language model, but within that language, there is whole lot of things that it is able to do. It's not unidimensional in that sense, right? So a foundational model is something which is much broad-based sort of an application.
Right. And Amitabh, as you mentioned, tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, they've come around in the past few years. So can you tell us what were some of the assumptions before we saw the rise of DeepSeek in the world of AI?
So till DeepSeek came out, what was happening is most of these LLMs were coming from American corporations, big companies, the Googles and the X or Twitter or Meta, those kind of companies were doing it. And it was assumed that these large language models, because they require huge amount of data to be trained on, they require huge processing power because, it has to go through lots and lots of data. So it was understood that this is something that requires investments of very large sums of money, hundreds of billions of dollars. That was the assumption number one. The other assumption was that you have to create huge amounts of data sets and you have to run large data centers, which are very energy intensive. The large processing power that was required could only be had with very special kind of chips, which are called GPUs. The GPUs have been around for quite some time, but earlier they used to be, used mainly for gaming purposes. Now GPUs are again very, very niche products. Not many companies make it. And you would have heard the name of NVIDIA, which has a lead in making these GPUs. Certainly, NVIDIA became one of the most sought after companies. Suddenly, it went into a completely different league because of this demand for GPUs. So it was understandable that, we would take some more time to be able to do all those things because there was a lot of things required to be put together before you actually could start producing LLMs on your own.
And how did DeepSeek exactly break these assumptions and criteria of sorts?
And then suddenly the DeepSeek comes and it showed that a lot of those assumptions were not exactly correct.
President Trump says the rapid rise of the Chinese artificial intelligence company DeepSeek is a wake-up call for the US tech industry. DeepSeek, which its owners say cost around just $6 million to develop, has become the most downloaded free app in the US.
The fact that they were able to train an AI model for a fraction of the cost of what OpenAI and Google and Anthropic and all the other big AI players are spending really shows that you don't necessarily need a lot of money to build AI. Until now, companies like OpenAI
actually challenged the existing understanding of how LLMs are built and suddenly came up with an alternative sort of a thing, which said, look, we can do it in a different way as well. You only require hundreds of billions of dollars, but you can do it at much cheaper rates. You can do it with a smaller number of GPUs. You can do it with training on smaller amount of data and everything. Suddenly, India said, no, we need to do something similar. And that's why you probably saw the statement from the IT minister saying, no, we'll do it in another 9 months. We should have our own foundational model and that kind of a thing.
Also, Amitabh, why is it exactly important to have our own AI infrastructure?
Right. So that is where actually the race is. Why do we need, if the ChatGPT already exists, why don't we just work on ChatGPT, or maybe, develop our own applications on top of ChatGPT and start working with it? Why don't we do that? Now, the thing is, AI is supposed to get embedded into a lot of systems, which not just we, but every other country is very, very sensitive about. They would become embedded into defense, for example. They would become embedded into space. They would become embedded into nuclear systems and all sorts of whatever we can imagine. I mean, just like computers are now ubiquitous everywhere, you can't imagine running any operation without a computer. Similarly, wherever there is computer, now we would start taking the help of AI as well, right? So you would want to have a full control over the data and the algorithm that runs on top of it. It's like having the OS, the operating system. So there are two things to an AI, right? One is the algorithm itself, the foundational model itself, the model. The other part is data on which that model is trained. And when they come together, then that's where you get ChatGPT kind of systems. Now, if you don't have either, the model is not yours, which means you do not know how it is behaving and what it is doing, then behavior is not under control. The other thing is, if it's not trained on your data, if it is trained only on foreign data, then it lacks the local sensitivities and local nuances. Then it has a certain kind of biases. And if we are dependent on just the foreign companies or foreign models, then obviously we are not in control. And because its use is going to be ubiquitous everywhere, so we would preferably, and it would be a very, very critical piece of infrastructure, right? So, I mean, AI would become an infrastructure sort of a thing. So you would like to have a control over it. And that's the main reason why we need to have our own AI.
Right. And when we speak of India's AI ecosystem, what are the major gaps that we see?
So on both these, so we tried, and the colleagues who worked on this story, Vidhatri and Alind, they spoke to a large number of people. In fact, we spoke to all the leading researchers, 15, 20 people who are in different parts of the country in different institutions. So some of the things that on both the sides, I mean, on data side as well as developing the model, we have not been working on these things. So largely, it's not something that we cannot do. It's mainly that we have not been paying attention to this, right? But as happens with everything else, we were a little slow to start with. And eventually we decided to have an AI mission only last year. So it's practically only from last year that we have begun to work towards developing this kind of a system, right? Which is what we are using. So a ChatGPT kind of a system, we were not even trying to do earlier, and we've just begun now. So, and as I said, it's not something that we cannot do, but there are certain things that need to be done. So one is, of course, creating the data sets. So if we have to train these models on Indian data sets because of our huge population, because of the huge diversity and the variations that are there in this population, we don't have dearth of data, but that data has to be created and it has to be cleaned and it has to be made worthy of being trained upon. So that work has to happen, which had not happened in the past. And of course, the model itself has to be created. Now, both these things can be done. It's just that because we had not been paying adequate attention to it, so we are slightly late on that.
And also, Amitabh, with thousands of languages and dialects, how does India's multilingual landscape pose a challenge, for AI training? And also, why is it important to have Indian data sets?
So one of the researchers was telling Vidhatri, for example, the kind of nuances that are there. And I'm sure there are similar kind of nuances in different countries and different societies as well. We are not very unique in that. But consider this. I mean, normally we would say So this researcher was telling us, and he said, we say, "Ye lal lal gulab chahiye." Now that lal lal gulab chahiye, one lal is just for an emphasis. It doesn't actually mean red, right? Now, if you are just translating into an English language, it would just translate into what? Red sort of a thing. But that's not what it means. No, it's one of the words is for emphasis. So if we don't have these models trained on Indian data sets the way we speak, and also one of the things that you yourself mentioned is because we speak multilingual, right? We are mixing not just Hindi and English, but also mixing a lot of other, Hindi and Urdu. And if you go to other, non-Hindi speaking states, they are mixing Hindi with, Kannada, or Hindi with Tamil or English. There are more extreme examples of these kind of things as well for the machine to be able to understand you properly. So that is why, training on Indian data sets is very, very important.
Next, we talk about grenade attacks in Punjab. Since 20th December, two border districts in Punjab, Amritsar and Gurdaspur, have been facing multiple grenade attacks by suspected militants. The first attack was reported around 9:30 p.m. on 20th December 2024 when some unidentified people hurled a grenade at the Wadala Bangar police post in Gurdaspur district. These attacks have been targeting police stations and police posts in the region. So far, 12 such grenade attacks have taken place, with most of them happening post-sunset. The security in and around these police stations have been leveled up since the attacks began. In this segment, the Indian Express's Aman Singh Chhina joins us to share more details. So, Aman, the Indian Express visited the areas where these attacks took place. Can you describe what you saw?
Yes. So what we did was that we visited the border districts of Amritsar and Gurdaspur, where most of these attacks have taken place, these explosive device attacks and grenade attacks. So what we found was that while the normal life continues as usual, and there is no panic among the people, but there is a heightened sense of security as far as the police establishments go. By that, I mean the police stations, which are in these border areas, in the villages and small towns, as well as the police posts, which dot along the road or on important landmarks. So the security on these posts and police stations has been increased significantly. And this is a direct fallout of this attack, these spate of attacks rather, which have taken place over the past 3 to 4 months.
Right. And can you tell us how these attacks started and describe these attacks to us?
Well, these are attacks which take place in the shape of explosive devices or grenades which are lobbed by the miscreants who are passing by, who are either on motorcycles or they are on foot. Most have been seen on CCTV cameras. So they started off by attacking these isolated police posts, like I mentioned earlier. And the attacks have continued to take place on either police stations or police posts. Some have taken place on abandoned police posts also where there is nobody. So this is the manner in which they have gone about. So what they do is they approach this place wherever there is a security establishment of Punjab police, and they lob this explosive device or a grenade, and then they run away. So what the Punjab police is doing is they are tracing all of these cases one by one, and most of these cases have been solved by the Punjab police.
And Manaman, have these attacks been limited to just police stations and the areas around them?
No, this is around the police stations and the police posts. There are no civilian areas which have been targeted. Like I said, either these are outside the police stations or trying to lob a grenade or an incendiary device or explosive device inside the police station or near the wall of the police station or an abandoned police post. So these kind of things have taken place. No attack has been carried out on the general public as such.
And in the beginning, you had talked about how security has increased around these police stations. So can you tell us a little more about the extra security measures that are being taken?
So yes, there are some basic security measures which have been taken, which include setting up more roadblocks, more nakas, setting up blockages outside the police stations to make it difficult for somebody to approach it at night if they have any such intention in mind to carry out an attack. Raising the height of walls of the police stations is another one measure which has been taken by the Punjab police. The walls have been heavy. On our visit to the border areas, found that the walls have been raised very high, and nets are being put outside the police station in order to deter anybody throwing a grenade so that it bounces off the net. Armored tractors were visible in border police stations in the Gurdaspur district, which is a border district of Punjab. So these are the kind of measures which have been taken, and the police appears to be quite proactive.
And Manaman, have the reasons behind these attacks been deciphered yet?
Well, we have spoken to senior officers of the Punjab police, and they say that there is a nexus of gangsters and terrorists, the overlords who are based abroad. That nexus has developed, and the Indian Express has reported on this exclusive news break that as a part of this nexus, now the gangsters who are involved in extortions and all these kind of activities in the Punjab, they have joined hands with terrorists who are separatists, these Khalistani terrorists who get shelter in Pakistan, and they are encouraged by the Pakistan's intelligence agency ISI. So they have joined hands together, and it is the foot soldiers of these people who are carrying out these attacks. So as per the Punjab police senior officials, since the Khalistani elements are not getting enough recruits in Punjab, there is no sentiment in population of Punjab for a separatist agenda like Khalistan. Therefore, these gangsters have been roped in because they get these grenade lobbers very cheap, and they entice these youth who mostly are drug addicts, and they give them petty sums of money to do these tasks. And in any case, those who are throwing these explosive devices and grenades, they are petty criminals, the police say.
We also understand that certain separatist organizations have taken the responsibility for these attacks. So, has any investigation began regarding that?
So there are a couple of separatist organizations which have come forward to claim responsibility for the attacks, many of the attacks which have taken place. One of them is Babbar Khalsa International, and the other is Khalistan Zindabad Force. The people who run these organizations or are at the helm of these organizations are based abroad. They are not in India. They're either in Europe or they are in USA or they are based in Pakistan. And the Pakistan intelligence agency, the ISI, is actively supporting these separatist elements. So as of now, these two separatist organizations have come forward and taken the credit, rather, or the blame for whatever has happened till now. So this is another angle which the police is investigating.
Also, in a recent press conference, some police officials had suspected that Pakistan might be behind this.
Yes, the Director General of Police, Mr. Gaurav Yadav, has gone on record several times as saying that Punjab is a border state and Pakistan has been trying to take advantage of, this being a border state and fomenting problem in Punjab. And therefore, the spirit of attack are also a game plan of the ISI, the Pakistan's intelligence agency, to create trouble in Punjab, to spread an atmosphere of fear and to show that Punjab is a disturbed state. So they say these are feeble attempts which are being done. And since they are unable to, carry out any major attack, so they are doing these hit and run kind of operations.
And Manaman, what kind of political reactions has this incident garnered?
Well, the opposition has expressed its fears that, these incidents are not a very good sign and that there might be attempts to destabilize Punjab. Therefore, the focus of opposition has been in asking the police that why these attacks cannot be prevented. While the police have claimed that they have solved most of the attack incidents and arrested all of those people who are involved in these, the opposition says that the aim should be that these attacks should not take place in the first instance. And there has also been criticism of the police on some accounts that they have downplayed these incidents. So, when an grenade attack took place at a couple of places, in one instance it was dismissed as a tire burst. And in other incident it was dismissed as a radiator burst. So the opposition has also been saying that, alleging that the police has been trying to cover up these incidents.
Right, and how do we see this situation proceeding from here? What kind of efforts are being put in by the police in order to bring an end to this?
Well, the police is trying to send a message out that to the gangsters and the terrorists that, if you carry out these activities, that you will not get away with it. And there has been an encounter in UP after the Punjab police gave a tip-off to the UP police, where three miscreants who had thrown grenades at a police post were killed in the encounter. So these are the kind of deterrent messages which are being sent out by the police so that these incidents do not take place. But, the advantage is always with the miscreants and terrorists and gangsters who keep planning such incidents. But what the police officials say is that the good thing is that the gangsters and the terrorists are unable to find adequate number of recruits to carry out their tasks. And hence they are relying on petty criminals, and they are very confident that they can deter these petty criminals from doing this handiwork of the gangsters.
And in the end, we talk about the government opposing petitions seeking a lifetime ban on convicted politicians from contesting elections. The central government has submitted in the Supreme Court that there is nothing inherently unconstitutional in limiting their disqualification to 6 years. In a counter affidavit filed in the top court, the centre said that there are several penal laws that confine the operation of the penalty to an appropriate length of time, and added that by this, quote, deterrence is ensured while undue harshness is avoided, unquote. The affidavit was filed in response to a petition by Advocate Ashwini Kumar Upadhyay challenging the constitutional validity of Section 8 and 9 of the Representation of People Act 1951. Section 8 of the Act states that a person who has been sentenced to undergo imprisonment for offences specified in the provision shall be disqualified from contesting elections for 6 years after their release from prison. As per Section 9, for public servants dismissed for corruption or disloyalty to the state, the disqualification shall be for 5 years from the date of such dismissal. The plea argued that limiting the disqualification by time is violative of constitutional provisions and urged that the disqualification in such cases should be for a lifetime. Responding to the petition, the government said, quote, the question whether a lifetime ban would be appropriate or not is a question that is solely within the domain of Parliament. It is not for the petitioner or the respondent to state that the same is appropriate or even to state that the same would be excessive. As a matter of law, in imposing any penalty, Parliament seeks to maintain the principles of proportionality and reasonability, unquote. The centre submitted that a lifetime disqualification is the maximum that can be imposed under the provisions, and that to impose such disqualification is certainly within the power of the Parliament. The affidavit submitted by the government read, quote, however, it is one thing to say that power exists and another to say that it must necessarily be exercised in every case. The prayer of the petitioner amounts to rewriting the statute or directing Parliament to frame a law in a particular manner which is wholly beyond the powers of judicial review. It is trite law that courts cannot direct Parliament to make a law or to legislate in a particular way, unquote. After some more arguments, the counter-affidavit concluded that, quote, merely because, as a matter of policy, the petitioners feel that the impugned provisions may not be appropriate, the same would not be the ground for unconstitutionality of the provision, unquote. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's episode was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Ichha Sharma and me, Niharika Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcast and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.